In possibly the shortest meeting in its history, lasting only 16 minutes, the ministers of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and its alliance, known as OPEC Plus, met via video conference and approved a 400,000 barrels per day production hike from March. After much appeal and lobbying amid the soaring global price of crude oil, the group has finally agreed that Nigeria, Africa's largest producer, can increase its crude oil production quota. While this request has been on the table for a while, the bigger question surrounding this has been whether or not Nigeria has the ability to step up its production. Going by the events of the last few months, it is a question that needs asking. Nigeria lost its Africa's top oil producer status to Libya in October last year, as crude oil production fell further amid lingering supply disruptions. Nigeria recorded the second biggest drop in output in October among its peers in OPEC after Iraq. And recently, Trinity Spirits, an oil vessel used for storage that exploded off the coast of Nigeria, had not been maintained for some time and also had technical issues. The vessel was a floating production, storage, and offloading vessel which broke into two and partially submerged. As of now, there's no evidence that it has spilled crude into the ocean. Nemo Bassi from Health of Mother Foundation, which tracks oil spills in Nigeria, said the vessel, which has been in operation for more than 30 years, had outlived its lifespan of 20 years and should have been decommissioned before now. This is just one issue in a long list of things that have affected Nigeria's production capacity. Today, we're looking at addressing Nigeria's oil production loss. This is Business Edge. I'm Tolu Adelaru Balogun. Joining me on the show today is Bello Tukur. He's the Managing Director for Riverlake Nigeria. Bello, welcome to Business Edge once again. Since I'm seeing you for the first time this year, I'll also go ahead and say Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and Happy New Year to you too.
Thank you so much. So let's get into this. Now, prior to now, Nigeria has been asking that OPEC increase its production quota. Nigeria missed its crude oil output target for this January, pumping 1.46 million barrels per day against the approved target of 1.683 million barrels per day. Now, officials claim this is because of oil pipeline vandalism and delay in the full implementation of the Petroleum Industry Act and a few other things. So let's start from there. Why has Nigeria failed to meet its quota in recent times?
Okay, thank you. Well, it's simple. We've been able to meet our quota because of pipeline vandalism, and this has been going on massively for the past couple of years. Of course, as you know, about 14, 15 years ago, there was the amnesty program for the Niger Delta militant so that they will stop disrupting the crude oil pipelines. However, it looks like now what has happened is a lot of these pipelines are being busted for illegal oil refining, and that has been damaging the environment, and at the same time it's making the country lose a lot of its production. In October last year, SPDC declared a force majeure on the Transfocados pipeline, as well as the Nembe Creek trunk pipeline as well was also under force majeure. So as you can see, it's sort of like a pipeline sabotage that is making us actually not able to make this production quotas.
So you said this has been going on for a long time. We know also that the Petroleum Industry Act has also been in the National Assembly for a long time. And you've seen that people are sort of saying that it's the golden bullet, but we'll get to that. Nigeria isn't the only country that faces pipeline vandalism. So my question here has to be, given the fact that this has been happening for a number of years now, why has it been so difficult for Nigeria to get acts of pipeline vandalism under control? Because they're hurting the nation. It's hurting the nation's revenue. It's hurting the environment. Why has Nigeria struggled to get this situation under control?
Well, that's because there's a lot of channels. So basically, for a lot of the oil producing communities, what is more important for them is to they're not even interested in the in whatever community projects that these companies are going to implement. Yes, we know the PIA was delayed. However, that's actually not the major reason. The major reason is actually because some of these there's a market more or less for illegal refining, which has been thriving over the years, and that is what needs to be stopped, and the government needs to attack that very, very critically. Not only that, some of the pipelines that are being vandalized are also being stolen, because there is a lot of incentive for those who are breaking the pipelines to actually sell the steel, which is also quite valuable for them. So which is also further degrades the environment.
I like the fact we're talking about this. So let me just give us some numbers in regards to this. So a total of 1,161 pipeline points were vandalized across Nigeria in the 21 months between January 2019 and September of 2020. We also had that the vandalism happened across 5 pipeline axes nationwide, and we've seen that even in some places, for example, the Mosimi-Ibadan axis, there were 535 points that were actually damaged, and Nigeria has spent over 800 billion naira to repair. So when you look at it in actuality, how much has it cost the country to try to repair, and then how much has it cost the country in terms of the lost revenue from this vandalism that's been happening?
Well, this cannot really be quantified, because what we have seen recently is a lot of all these producers are trying to actually bypass the pipeline, and they're putting in measures to evacuate their oil through ships. But however, one of the major restrictions around all these creek areas is also the draft. So in terms of evacuating that volume, it's not very efficient. Of course, it's cheaper to evacuate it through the pipeline, and this is also putting more cost on the cost of production for our crude, and which isn't also good for the country in an area where there's been a drop in crude oil prices over the past few years. Of course, there's a rebound now, and as a country, we have not capitalized on that rebound because of all these losses.
All right, so let's get to the increase in production. So Nigeria has been requesting an increase in its production quota since about late last year, but even then, the country was not meeting the laid down quota and was even overtaken by Libya as the highest producer in October of 2021. This request for an increase in production, given the issues the country was having, what was Nigeria basing the request on?
Well, it's just to meet budgetary provisions. Of course, if we're producing more oil, then we have more money to spend on all the budgetary provisions. So there's been a high budget deficit, and the country has not really been able to meet that because of low receipts for our oil revenue.
So now that we've gotten to this point where OPEC has approved, even though previously they had said no, what do you think has changed OPEC's mind? Is it just because of the high prices and issues outside of what is happening with Nigeria that has allowed, or rather given OPEC the consideration to say yes to Nigeria's request?
Well, the global economy is recovering at the moment, so there's demand for energy, as we have seen since the beginning of this year. Even with the Omicron virus, a lot of countries did not really shut down as such, and with that whole optimism on recovery, this has also helped the price of oil to go up. So definitely there has to be more supply into the energy market, and for that reason, it's our request was more or less granted, because we need a lot more oil to actually satisfy the global energy needs.
Now, Bello, do you think Nigeria can, in some way, somehow, meet this new production quota?
Well, it's possible, and the only way this can be achieved is, of course, a lot of money has to be spent in repairing the pipelines, but this unending pipeline vandalism needs to stop, and there has to be like a solution, a long-term solution to this, because even though some of the producers are trying to bypass the pipeline, evacuating their products using ships, is still increasing the cost of production, especially when the price of the oil is still very volatile. We don't see it being steady for a very long time. Of course, this depends on oil outputs from other OPEC countries and also the OPEC plus countries. And I think the recent tension between Russia and the West has also helped to boost the price of the oil. But however, if there is a solution there, we might see price of oil come down again.
Okay, so we're going to take a break, but when we come back, OPEC has agreed to allow for a 400,000 barrel per day production increase in January for all members, of which about 254,000 barrels per day was shared by the 10 OPEC members participating in the deal, and the rest for those outside of OPEC. When we come back, we'll look at what it takes, because you've answered it a bit, but in terms of Nigeria meeting its new production quota, does the country, Africa's largest oil producer, have what it takes? You're watching Business Edge. We'll be right back after this. And still with me is Bello Tukur. He's the managing director of Riverlake Nigeria, as we look at addressing Nigeria's oil production loss. Now, Bello, we're seeing Nigeria getting an increased production quota from OPEC, but this question almost seems elementary in asking, but it has to be asked. And you've mentioned it a bit, but let's get further into that. What factors do you think will determine Nigeria's ability to meet these new quotas? Is Nigeria still going to have to deal with the same factors that have hindered the country before now? Are we still having to deal with the vandalism? So what we're going to see consistently in the few weeks and the few months coming ahead of us is Nigeria still failing to meet a new increased production quota?
Well, the solution to this pipeline vandalism has to be long-term. Even though now with the new PIA Act, there is provision for extra budgetary allocation to oil-producing communities, we hope this will go a long way in terms of reducing the act of vandalism, at least getting them to be part of the whole oil production circle. However, it's going to cost quite a bit of money, because a lot of the independent producers who are producing in all these communities have lost a lot of money, especially last year with a decline in production. So they've not been able to capitalize on these high oil prices. Even though we have a lot of how would I say evacuation being done via ships, but that has actually just increased the cost. So yes, in the short term, there has to be those pipelines have to be repaired. That's the only way we can be able to meet that quota. We have to be able to take that loss and be able to make that investment. However, more engagement with the local communities in terms of stopping this pipeline vandalism is highly necessary, because I don't really see anything happening without the local community being involved in ensuring that this doesn't continue, and all hands need to be on deck to achieve this.
Let's look at the recent explosion that happened with the Trinity Spirit. It was the primary production facility for OML 108, which covers 750 square kilometers of water off the Niger Delta. So what effect will this explosion and basically the stop work that's happening there now have on Nigeria's production at this time?
Well, it's quite unfortunate what's happened to that facility, because in the past 3 years, the facility has actually been under receivership. So this is where the actual problem started, because there was actually a production decline in that particular field. And as the production was declining, there was also a lot of debt on the operators. And for that reason, the government actually took over that particular facility, which was done through the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria. So there should have been like a distress asset plan for that facility. Unfortunately, AMCON, who took over the facility, did not put together like proper management of that facility, which should have been done, and some money should have been pumped in to avoid the disaster that actually happened, but that wasn't done. Hence why the neglect, of course, over the past 3 years was part of the reason why we saw what happened.
Do we have a lot of facilities like this that have been neglected, that should have been decommissioned in Nigeria's crude oil and gas space? Because when you hear from people like Nimobasi, a very well-known environmentalist, he really does tend to focus on the fact that there's a lot of aging infrastructure and there's a lot of dilapidated infrastructure as well that some of these pipeline leaks are part of, not necessarily just vandalism, even just the aging of this infrastructure that's in use.
Yes, correct. Like the Trinity Spirit, for example, was built in 1974, so which is easily almost, I guess, 50 years old facility. However, it's a production ship, so that's not really the major problem. A lot of the blame actually has to actually lie with the government and the regulators, because it has to be a collective effort. There was too much bureaucracy. We bothered with too much bureaucracy rather than actually looking at the problem. For example, a ship of that size, which is able to store up to 2 million barrels of oil, at the current scrap prices would have fetched in excess of $25 million. So what should have been done is, knowing that the facility has aged, there should have been a short and medium-term solution, which is either to put in money and put in management that will manage the facility for a short term. And then if that's the case, they can also decide to decommission it and sell the ship as scrap. That way you can be able to recover more money. But at the moment, the vessel is a total loss, and there is no money for the receivers to get, and there's also of course the environmental problem that has to be faced now. It's not been confirmed yet whether there's been oil that has been spilled, but all this will unravel in the next few days.
And we'll continue to watch that situation play out. So let's look at investments, because while we talk about the production, a lack of investment is also affecting Nigeria. And we've actually seen divestments in recent times, but people are making it seem like the signing and the coming on board of the Petroleum Industry Act is some kind of golden bullet. What is it really? Do you think it will address the production problems? Will it help turn around the investment or divestment trends that Nigeria is currently seeing?
Well, yes and no. We might start seeing more investment now that there is a proper regulation on the increase of production in the country. But however, there are still underlying factors that need to be sorted out before this can be achieved. Of course, as you know, the world is going green now. A lot of European countries are not really looking at a lot of investment in fossil fuel, hence why you're seeing a lot of divestments by the big oil majors who are more or less looking at greener alternative. So I guess for me, the PIA have come 10 years too late. This is something that should have been done before the last oil boom, and then we would have been able to capitalize on that, because to capitalize on that when there was high oil demand.
All right, so we're going to start wrapping up, but let's look at this. And you mentioned it briefly in the beginning, but I want us to look at it now. OPEC generally has struggled to pump at target due to the inability of its members to meet their targets, despite the rise in oil prices. So beyond Nigeria, what's also affecting other OPEC members that they're finding it difficult to meet their own targets?
Well, a lot of it is also to do with the cost of production and also demand for oil as it is the past 2 years. Now that we know that COVID is here to stay, there is more optimism towards oil and its production. So I probably think there will be more production in years to come, of course, as the global economy starts to recover. And that will really be the driving force, and also in terms of investments, because the COVID pandemic actually really hit the markets quite hard.
It did. All right, let me get your answer in just 2 or 3 sentences. So crude oil prices are trading at 7-year highs. OPEC Plus has increased the overall production quota, but many producers, as we said earlier, are still struggling. What do you think we should expect in the coming weeks and months? Will oil hit $100 per barrel? What it would mean for a country like Nigeria? Let me have that in 2 or 3 sentences.
Well, it depends on the Russia situation. So that will probably see if the price is going to go up. But I think it will probably stabilize at about 95 within the next few weeks.
All right, so we'll leave it at that. Bello Tukur, thank you so much for joining me on Business Edge, and we'll see you sometime soon.
Thank you.
And right now we know that oil is hovering just under that $90 per barrel mark. A lot of people are watching OPEC increasing quota across board to 400,000 with an additional 400,000 barrels per day. But will OPEC members, not just Nigeria, be able to meet up? And as Bello said, what will the Russia-Ukraine situation mean for the global crude oil production? This is Business Edge. It's something we'll continue to watch out for, particularly with countries like Nigeria, Angola, and Libya continuing to try to meet their production quotas. Up next is NC4 to watch. And here are a few stories that we're keeping our eyes on. We start in East Africa, where Kenya has earned 33.7 billion Kenyan shillings from textile exports in the 9 months to September 2021, a 31.1% growth. The rise in textile exports earnings was boosted by higher sales to the United States and the Netherlands. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, which is the U.S. free trade scheme, allows Kenya to export selected goods at preferential terms to the U.S., exempting them from paying tax. The initiative, which was expected to end in 2015 after an initial deadline of 2012, was extended by U.S. lawmakers for 10 years until 2025. Moody's Investors Service has downgraded Ghana's long-term issuer and senior unsecured debt ratings to Caa1 from B3 and changed the outlook to stable from negative. It said the new ratings for the country's economy reflects the woes Ghana is facing in fixing its liquidity and debt challenges. Credit Suisse is pulling out of 9 African countries and referring clients to a competitor. Switzerland's number 2 bank, is ending its clients' relationships in countries south of the Sahara, according to a Bloomberg report. The Ivory Coast, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Mauritius, Tanzania, Zambia, Botswana, and the Seychelles are the countries affected, but activities in South Africa are unaffected. And finally, South Africa's net reserves dipped by $55.005 billion in January from $55.309 billion in December. Gross reserves fell to $57.199 billion in January from $57.589 billion in December. The forward position, which represents the central bank's unsettled or swap transactions, dropped to $3.376 billion from $3.404 billion. And that's Business Edge for today, Monday. Don't forget to follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, download our mobile app and take us with you wherever you go. I'll be back 11 a.m. West African time throughout the week as we talk African business, the economy, and finance right here on Business Edge. I'm Tolu Balogun.